Welcome to the CTM Turnaround Standards. I'm going to be sharing with you an overview of the math turnaround standards. So here we are in math, and let's go and look at kindergarten. So if I open up the document, for example, kindergarten, they all kind of work the same way. But kindergarten starts out with the mathematical practices. These two mathematical practices are bang for the buck mathematical practices. And you want to really work with students in working on these. The first one is MP1, Mathematical Practice 1, make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. And then right here is the action, what you can do in the classroom, design structured and unstructured time for students to actively collaborate with their classmates, to grow their skills in problem solving, cooperation, communication, innovation, reflection, self-regulation, and empathy. For example, when students are in math centers or when they share tasks such as counting out supplies. And here's MP7, look for and make use of structure, promotes a sense of belonging by including math routines such as number talks, choral counting, counting collections, and other counting routines so that students see themselves as part of a community. So you'll have that MP, those mathematical practices coming at you, and then there will be an action, where and kind of how. Underneath that is a section. It's called Fluency Foundational Facts. And in kindergarten, fluency foundational facts have to do with addition, present images using a quick look routine, and there's steps on how to do that. And then down below, the quick, they suggest that you use doubles. And so if you click here, I give you an example right here. I give you some quick images, a link here that you can kind of use, the dot cards and PowerPoints and a whole bunch of resources here that you can use for that. Down below, again, we're in this fluency component. When you're working on fluency and addition, you also want to work on combinations, 5, 10, making 5, and making that 10. You also want to use that number line in combination with that stamp game. So compare counting up and counting back strategies. I will count down to, if you ask students what's 5 minus 2, say I'm going to count down 2. So the answer is kind of change up the language that you're going to use. Or 2 to 5. I will count up to see how far 2 is from 5. The answer is, you're just kind of working with students on that component. Underneath that are the standards themselves. And there'll be clusters and standards, and they're color-coded. Remember, the red are the priority standards, and the yellow are the supporting standards. And you're going to have some achieve the core and acceleration kind of language. You'll hear more about this from the district, but this is really good anecdotal information that you will need to strongly consider, especially when you're identifying your priority standards and determining your pacing. So KCA, time spent on instruction and practice should not be reduced. Notice that. And then it will say combine lessons on numbers 11 through 9 to address. It's going to have how you can combine things, combine lessons on describing and comparing measurable attributes. You'll want to really read this to kind of determine what you have to do. It says limit the amount of practice, but then there's some caveats that come in with these yellow standards. So like this one, integrate classifying and counting objects, and it gives you another standard with it, with other counting comparison works in grade to reduce the amount of time. So sometimes they'll combine another standard in here that you can kind of look at. But you're going to be making instructional decisions looking at this. And this is kindergarten. So let's look at a higher grade. Oh, sorry, went back to a normal screen here. Let's look at first grade. Again, notice those mathematical practices. In first grade, you have a little bit more coming to you. You have one more, MP1, MP3, and then you have MP7 here. And then you have actions, right? The how and the why for the mathematical practices. Again, you have fluency foundational facts, and it gives you a step 1, identify the focus using 10 frames. Step 2, give quick looks. Step 3, talk about how many did you see, how did you see the total. And step 4, you're going to connect those symbols. What number sentence could match this quick look? How can we write the addition fact? So again, it's the concrete and it's representational and connecting that abstract. Then you have the progression for foundational addition and subtraction facts. Again, connecting number line to stamp game. So stories is going to be a big one coming out in first grade. There are 3 pencils on my desk and 0 pencils in my backpack. How many pencils do I have in all? Or I have 5 apples in all. Some are red, some are yellow. How many of each might I have? That is a problem that often trips up students, especially in third grade. Just the flexibility in thinking about those scenarios. Quick looks, carefully select and sequence. Again, I link in here so you can go and you can get those first grade quick looks to use. Doubles, 2 plus 2, 3 plus 3, 4 plus 4, so forth. Quick looks and stories, image with dots, image in 10 frame, image with stamp game, story problem. So you're really varying it up. Combinations of 10s, use 10 frames in combination with the stamp game. They'll more likely see that stamp game, that 10 frame, but you know that stamp game is really going to build the schema. So you want to have that as well. Then you have those standards that are coming out. Time spent on instruction, you're going to really should not be reduced. You're going to see that a lot. If it says something else, there's going to be a caveat. And then again, underneath those priority standards come your yellow standards. It's going to say limit the amount of time, but again, there might be a little caveat that you're going to need to read. So that's going you will have some nice discussion, I'm sure, in your PLC, and just kind of making sense of this as you determine what your pacing is. Again, the goal is for acceleration, which is our turnaround. Using what we know and putting in our sources that we have from the district and Engage New York and so forth. So again, these are turnaround standards for first grade. Let's go in and look at second grade. Second grade, again, you have your mathematical practices. They look very similar to first grade, building on. Okay. Again, you want to really read over those actions so that you know what they are. The fluency foundation. Now, making a fluency means not necessarily fluency like you and I have fluency of maybe those quick timed multiplication tests. There's a lot of research against that. And so you want to make sure students have automaticity with the strategies, with increased focus on explicit strategy instruction. So helping students with that by playing games that involve a mixture of addition and subtraction. And so I have the games here. If you click on, I've copied from the Math Fact Fluency book. I have copied those pages that explain these games in greater details. Okay. Click out of that, come back. Again, all these games are in here that are noted. So again, you come down and you have a document with standards. And these again are the turnaround standards. And again, you want to kind of read off to the right side. What does that really entail? For example, 20AA emphasize problems that involve sums less than or equal to 20 and or related differences. So I've kind of highlighted or underlined what's really important that you kind of consider as you kind of move through these standards. And then you're going to get into these yellow standards, and you're going to notice that there's some talk about how to kind of, for example, just kind of like minimize that standard. It does have weight, but what are you going to eliminate in it so that you're only focusing on what you need to focus on? For example, eliminate lessons on foundation for multiplication. So second grade, that's not going to really support your students. Representing lengths on a number line diagram is really going to support your students. So time spent on instruction and practice should not be reduced. Just kind of really helps you understand what's really important as we're teaching in this NTI world that we're in. X out of that, and let's go back to third. Again, looking at third, you have your mathematical practices. They're very similar to first, second, and third. Foundational multiplication and division facts. Apply strategies fluently. They must have mastered foundational facts. So you're going to do that through quick images. You can also do that through equal group stories, arrays, rotating to illustrate that commutative property, like 6 times 5. Is 6 times 5 the same as 5 times 6? And then taking that array and breaking it up to show that distributed property, and focusing on those multiplication quick looks. Equal groups, teach students to read 6 times 5 as 6 groups of 5. Equal group stories, multiplication and division. And also notice this partitive division. Progression for multiplication is really important. So you're going to work with students to master those 2s, then those 10s, then the 5s, then the 1s, then the 0s, then the 4s, then the 8s, then the 3s, then the 6s, and then the 9s. Usually you'll notice that teachers go 0s and then 1s and then 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, like they're counting. Again, the progression for multiplication at CTM is going to be teaching the 2s first, then the 10s, and the 5s, and so forth, just like you read it is right here. Questions that you're going to ask when you're working with students: how did you solve it? How do you know it's correct? Is there another way to solve it? If someone didn't know the answer to 2 times 3, how would you tell them how to figure it out? What strategy can you use to find that fact? How is 2 times 3 like 3 times 2? How are they different? Again. Okay, and again, we have those green and those, the red and the yellow standards. The red are your priority standards, and again, the yellow are the supporting. But again, you're really looking at those to see specifically what you should or should not do with a standard. For example, this first one, time spent on instruction and practice should not be reduced. Extra support to see row and column structure in arrays and objects. Okay, so that kind of helps you. Or this one, incorporate additional practice with double-digit sums. Okay, and so forth. We're down here, we're in 3 MBT1. Combine lessons and rounding in order to reduce the amount of time with rounding. and so forth. So again, highlight and really kind of note what's important and what's not important as you're identifying your standards, working with your standards, designing lessons to support those standards, and developing your pacing in when after having identified those standards. Moving on to fourth grade. Again, fourth grade, those MPs, the how and the whys over here, the foundation, what's important foundationally, equal group stories, arrays and rotating, very similar to third grade, just kind of building on. I've linked in the multiplication quick links, progression for multiplication, same as third grade. And then we move on to those priority standards. Those really notice that for NFA, for NFC, those NFs coming with you, those OAs, and we're in the MBTs. Those are supporting. However, if they're supporting, it's going to kind of clarify what to focus on and what not to focus on within that standard. Because if you open up a standard on KDE or even with our district, they can be pretty bulky. So again, knowing what's important and what's not. And again, these are our turnarounds. And we roll into fifth grade here. Fifth grade is the same as fourth. Notice right here, I've got links. They're playing games. Okay, and I've linked those games in. And they're really looking at those. They have a little bit more coming to them in those MBTs and those NFs and some MD and a G. Okay, and they also have yellow as well. Notice what you can eliminate and what you cannot eliminate within those standards. If you have any questions whatsoever, please reach out to me and I will help PLCs and or key facilitators make sense of what they are interpreting.